Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fall 2020 Social Entrepreneurship for Innovation in Health course. As you're aware from the course overview, this week and the next, the module is going to focus on co creation. During these 2 weeks, you'll be able to review real world and potential co creation proposals spearheaded by health innovators. This week's model talks about co creation with focus on leveraging shared value. And I'm delighted to host Simon Berry from Cola Life as our guest expert for today. But before we get started, please don't forget to take the survey that you can see below the screen to get extra points to watch us live. Also, don't forget to drop your questions for Simon. During the session, we will be able to address your questions. So, hi, Simon, and welcome to the session. And congratulations for the great work you're doing at Cola Life. And before I get on to the session with the questions, a small question about your journey. Simon, you today's session is about co-creation and leveraging shared value. So we are going to be talking about questions related to that. But we know that you have a diverse experience of studying agriculture, masters in tropical animal health, globetrotting on various social projects. So having said all of this, could you please share a little bit about your professional journey as a social entrepreneur and your aspirations?
Yes, I haven't followed a well. First of all, thank you for having me and for that very kind introduction. But I haven't had much of a career as most people would think of as a career. I have sort of moved about a bit and followed my nose and have worked on the basic principle: that if it hurts, stop doing it and do something else. So as you said, I studied agriculture at university, and then I went on to study tropical animal health. Then I worked for the overseas aid program, the British overseas aid program, for 12 years in various countries as a contracted technical officer. And that took me to South America, the Caribbean, and Africa. And then I came back to the UK and got involved in UK-based rural development. That organization was called RuralNet, and that was when I first attracted the label of a social entrepreneur, although I never really saw myself as one. But RuralNet was a social business. It did things to improve the livelihoods of people in rural areas, but it didn't change any systems. And then in 2008, I returned to an idea that I'd had while working overseas in Zambia about the co-distribution of medicines with Coca-Cola, on the basis that wherever you go in the world, you can find a Coke, but you can't find essential medicines that would stop a child dying, for example. And that at that point is when my career became very unprofessional, because I actually gave up my job together with my wife, and we spent 18 months trying to get this 20-year-old idea of co-distribution tested in the real world. And then after 18 months of trying to do that, we were successful. And that's when the journey I'm going to talk to you about started. So we're now in 2008.
Okay, so our learners have already reviewed your profile on the course platform and they know about the association you have with Cola Life. But could you tell us a little bit more about the genesis of Cola Life and how it all happened?
Well, it started in 1986 when I was working on a non-health project. It was in northeast Zambia. Slash and burn agriculture was the order of the day, because the environment could support that, because there were only about 2 people per square kilometer, so very remote. But wherever I went, I could get a Coca-Cola. This was before the internet. We didn't have telephones in those days in northeast Zambia, so it was very isolated, and it was very difficult to share ideas and get information. But slowly I realized, well, first of all, I noticed I could get a Coke wherever I went. And then I slowly became aware of the massive level of child mortality. In those days, 1 in 5 children died before their 5th birthday. And the second biggest killer of those children was actually diarrhea, which is incredibly easy to treat with very simple, cheap,
Indeed.
stable medicines. So the idea was that we should put these medicines in Coca-Cola crates using the unused space between the necks of the bottles. And that would mean that wherever you could find a Coke, you could find these medicines. Now, that is the idea that got the ball rolling. It was the idea that excited people. And but actually, as you'll hear later, the co-distribution has not been important, but other things that we learned from Coca-Cola have been important, in fact, very important. And that's what's led us to a successful trial, a scale up in Zambia, and then move on to the more global things. But that's how it all started in 1986. It then sat dormant really because the technology for sharing wasn't there. The attitude between private sector, NGO sector and public sector was different. Back in those days, the public sector did what the public sector did, the NGO sector did what they did, and the private sector did something else. And there was very little collaboration. But now the whole environment has changed, as you know. There are these partnerships that are springing up all over the place between public and private, and also between NGO and both of those sectors. And so the environment changed and enabled us to move from an interesting idea to actually testing it out in practice.
Great. I think it's such a long journey that you've come through, 1986 to 2020. Simon, today's course focus, the focus of the module for this week is co-creation. And that actually is the importance of having different stakeholders and the relationship that we have with them. And who else can actually talk best about it other than you, because you have the success of Cola Life from where we can learn. So my question to you with regard to this is, Cola Life actually transformed the access to recommended diarrhea treatment for children in Zambia. How have you approached creating shared value between Cola Life and corporate stakeholders in Zambia and globally?
Well, it wasn't something we specifically set out to do, but it was something we had to do because Cola Life was about increasing access to essential medicine. So it was about public health, it was about logistics, it was about product design, specifically product design of medicine. Now, we know nothing about public health. We know absolutely nothing about logistics, and we know nothing about medicine regulation, the design of products at all. So we just had this idea. So in order to realize that idea, we had to gather people around us that had that expertise. And again, it's not about just gathering one person or one organization, because you're not going to find someone with packaging expertise who knows everything about public health or logistics and so on. So we had to attract these people to our idea. Now, the way we did it, and initially that was the stumbling block, because it was just Jane and myself, just two individuals with no track record in public health, no track record in logistics. And we had to somehow pull these people to us. We had no power. When we rang up Coca-Cola to try and get their attention, we hit a brick wall. And we tried, but it was just hopeless. We'd never got past their social responsibility person. So we decided that we needed some power to pull these people together. The way we didn't want the power, the sort of power that you need to make people do things. We wanted soft power. So power that would pull people to us. And the way we did that was through Facebook. We started a group in Facebook, which had some vague title like "Let's Talk to Coca-Cola About Saving Children's Lives" or something like that. And that generated massive interest. We put this germ of an idea up that, you know, what about if Coke gets everywhere and medicines don't? What if we combine the two and get the medicines where the Coke goes? And that created massive interest, and it brought people to our idea. It brought, I would say, ordinary people who just thought it was a good idea, but it also brought in the expertise, or a lot of the expertise that we needed. And most importantly, it gave us the power we needed to get the attention of others. And the first people we got the attention of was the BBC. And they ran a couple of national programs, I say national in the UK, on this idea. And they, because of their impartiality approach, they had the power, which we didn't, to bring Coca-Cola to this conversation. So it was through an interview, which I went into pretty blindly with the BBC, that the relationship with Coca-Cola was made. So at the end of this interview, up pops Coca-Cola, to my great surprise. And it was from there that the relationship with Coca-Cola started. We had the relationship that the person who was brought to that interview by the BBC was none other than the global head of stakeholder relations for Coca-Cola, so the top person. And he invited me to lunch. He happened to be, although he was working globally, he happened to work in Brussels. So I could just hop on the train and go and see him. And he gave the advice to us about how we should take things forward as far as Coca-Cola was concerned.
Great, great. Just because you're talking about power, I'm going to take the first question that came from our live audience. Hannah Delane from BI Germany asks, have you experienced cynicism from other parties given the huge commercial power of Coca-Cola?
Well, cynicism is a polite way of putting it. We have been attacked. There are lots of issues, you know. On the one hand, we are trying to improve the public health of young children, and we're trying to do it with a company who is not exactly associated with the good health of young children. So a lot of purists, and not just purists, but actually most of the public health sector completely blanked us. They would have nothing to do with us, and that's still the case today for some people. But we stayed strong on that because we have this belief that everyone can contribute to an idea, irrespective of who you work for. And if you're in a situation, which we were, where we needed to know what Coca-Cola knew, because if we knew what they knew and how they operated, we would be able to apply it to the public health problem we were trying to solve, and we would get a better outcome. So that's what we did. So, and people then say, well, and then as the conversation will show later on, that we know the link with Coca-Cola is now not as strong as it was, and whereas we were in like weekly contact with them when we were doing all the planning, we don't hardly talk to them at all now. But their ideas were actually absolutely crucial and to our success, and the generosity that they showed us in terms of sharing the way their distribution system works was huge. And we wouldn't be where we are now without that. And so then people say to us, okay, so you don't do anything with Coca-Cola anymore. Why are you still called Cola Life? Now the Cola Life name comes from this question. How come you can get Coca-Cola wherever you are in the world, but you can't get life-saving medicines? And I say to those people, well, if we were called Hope for Africa, we wouldn't be out
Yes,
of the starting blocks.
absolutely.
Our name prompts questions. It's unusual.
Yes.
It generates a conversation, and it generates questions which we were very happy to answer. So that's why we're still, to this day, called
Mhm.
Cola Life.
Great. So Cola Live was a strategic title, is it?
Yes, it was, and a provocative one. We
Oh.
wanted to stand out. We wanted
Mhm.
people to say, "Cola? You know, what is this all about?" And to ask that question, and then give it so that we had the opportunity to respond. We didn't want people to immediately know what, well, immediately think they knew what we were about without actually asking us.
Correct. Correct. Simon, we have an amazing audience today. There are more than 100 viewers already seeing this session, and we have questions coming in. So I'm just going to take one more question from the audience from Paulina Miranda from Mexico. And Paulina asks, what has been the biggest challenge in logistics and accessible distribution of medicines in low income communities?
That's a very big and very good questions. And hello to you in Mexico. I have great affinity for Mexico. We won't go into that now, but perhaps later. Anyway, the problem with health logistics is the same the world over. And that
Mhm.
is that there's massive demand. Basically, everybody in the population at some point, in fact, many times, is going to need some sort of medical assistance. They're going to need some sort of medical
True,
product, and someone has to
true,
get it to them.
true.
Now, in the UK, we have the National Health Service, which is world known for providing free care to anybody. So all you have to do is you pitch up at the hospital with a problem and they sort you out. You don't have to pay. However, that system would completely collapse if there wasn't a vibrant private sector system sitting right along it. So we also have all the pharmacies you could ever want, all sorts of private medical services as well. And people go to them because they can afford to, or it's just more convenient for many, many reasons. And they don't want to go to a hospital when they've got a simple problem that they can go and get the medicine for from the pharmacy. However, in less developed countries,
Mhm.
the Western world, and I'm
Mhm.
part of that,
Mhm.
the global north has, a lot of people in the global north have this idea that somehow
Mhm.
poor countries should be able to provide everything. The government should be able to provide everything for every citizen.
Mhm.
And they don't even look or encourage private sector involvement in that process. Now,
Yes.
that's obviously not realistic. I mean, we couldn't do that. And we're a
Mhm.
very rich country, relatively speaking. We couldn't do that.
Yes.
The government in this country couldn't provide for everyone's health needs all the time. So why should we expect poor countries to do so? So you have
Yes.
to involve the private sector, and
Mhm.
increasingly, even more so possibly in the
Mhm.
developing world than you do in the more developed world. And so that is one of the reasons, or one of the reasons why we initially focused on improving access to this particular diarrhea treatment through the private sector. Now, funnily enough, although that's been our focus and it's still an important channel for the medicine in Zambia to get to
Mhm.
the customers or the patients, what's happened since we've left Zambia is the government have now come on board as a customer, and
Mhm.
they now distribute 80% of our kits to free of
Okay.
charge to people in the public
Okay.
sector. So logistics is a big, get back to your question, logistics is a massive problem, or a massive challenge, I should say. It can't be solved by one sector. It has to be solved by sectors, and I would think, the social sector, the public sector, and the private sector all working together.
Great. And that actually brings me to a question which has more to do with entrepreneurship. How do you manage your risks as an entrepreneur? And to further this, how do you keep that agile approach in your company culture while forging partnerships with large organizations?
Hmm. Um, there's lots to that. I mean, what I've run a fairly large, Jane and I have run a fairly large non-profit in the UK, which got to 20 employee or 15 to 20 employees,
Mhm,
and it became a machine which
mhm.
needed feeding all the time. And there were lots of risks involved because every step you take,
Yes.
there were the employees to think about, the reputation of the organization, and so on.
Mhm.
With Cola Life, we've never been more than 2 full-time people.
Oh.
And that makes it a lot easier to take risks because the worst thing that can happen is the two of you can be without a job.
Mhm,
Also, it means that, or we think anyway, that
mhm,
it made it much easier for the likes of Coca-Cola to engage with us
mhm,
because we weren't a power to be reckoned with. We weren't in any form in competition with them. And in fact, I think that goes for many of the organizations we partnered with. We weren't seen as a threat. We were seen as a catalyst,
mhm.
and we was disposable or dispensable. If things went wrong, it would be quite easy to park the problem with us and we would have gone away. Um,
Yes.
but I do understand that it is different for very large organizations, and our experience isn't necessarily transferable straight across to other organizations. But yeah, but everything's possible if you. Oh, so the other thing I suppose to say in this context is, you were saying, how do we sort of remain agile? The
Mhm,
key the key thing in there for us is to have a very clear mission or vision, I should say.
mhm.
Now, everyone's talks about missions and visions and all that sort of thing. It can get very complicated, but it's very straightforward. Be very clear about what it is you're trying to do.
Yes.
And if you ever hit a barrier,
Mhm,
go straight back to that vision and do what your vision tells you. So, for example, in our case, we got all our support initially because of this idea of
mhm,
putting medicines in Coke crates. We had
mhm,
thousands of people following us.
mhm,
People had invested money in testing out this idea. And when we came to test out the idea, we found that the medicine got to our target audience.
mhm,
However, it did not go in Coca-Cola crates. So
Oh.
we'd won the packaging award of the year in the US. We'd won product design of the year in the UK. And all of a sudden, what we'd have been awarded for wasn't important. What
Mhm,
was important was the other things that we learned from Coca-Cola, and that is, good product design, aspirational product design,
mhm,
marketing it to the end users, making it profitable for everyone along the value chain or the distribution chain to engage in its distribution. That's what we learned from Coke. The co-distribution idea, the idea of putting medicines into Coke crates, was a
mhm,
cool idea. It was totally irrelevant. So at this point, when we'd won all these awards, we got this money, we tested the idea, and all of a sudden, the basis of what we were about was removed. And it was very difficult. What do you do? We
mm,
went back to our mission, and our mission was about improving access to diarrhea treatment.
Correct.
And if carrying the medicine in Coke crates doesn't contribute to that mission in the way we thought, you ditch it and you
Mhm,
move forward following your vision. And then what we did is we completely redesigned this award-winning kit. We threw out the packaging. did new packaging, and scaled up. But so that very difficult change of direction was made very easy because we knew, we were very clear what we were trying to do. Now, again, because we were small, we could do it. If we'd had 20 people, 15 people working on product design and another load of people working on medicine design, medical product design, it would have been very much more difficult for us to change.
Yes.
But you have to change if you want to achieve your mission, because it's no good carrying on down a path which is going to corrupt your mission.
Correct. So cross-learning is great from partners, but you need to keep revisiting your vision, is it?
I don't yet. Well, you obviously need to keep revisiting your vision, but we didn't have to revisit our vision at all because we got it right first time. But you must stay true to your vision, and don't get corrupted by opportunities of funding over here or people's opinions over there. You have to be strict and give up those funding opportunities and stick to your mission.
Great. Okay, great. I have an interesting question in the backdrop of the pandemic that we all are in. As an innovator and a solution provider in the health space, how are you looking at the partnerships, and what is the most important thing for you and Cola Life at the moment in the backdrop of the global health crisis?
This is probably not the answer you're expecting. But the challenge that COVID presents us is not COVID itself. Our mission is to improve access to diarrhea treatment. And that is our mission because we know that the more of these treatments we get out there, the fewer children will die and the more children will have a better quality of life.
Yes.
COVID comes along, tragic as it is, but actually it doesn't really affect to any great extent young children. And even in adults of reproductive age, mothers and people looking after children, it has a low impact. People over 45, of course, it goes like that. So the challenge that we face is that because of COVID, health systems are being hugely challenged, particularly in poorer countries, which means that the coverage of diarrhea medicine falls. And there's a direct correlation between coverage, in other words, the number of people getting the treatment, and mortality. Yes. So it has been estimated, and I've got some figures and numbers here, which I might just share with you quickly, if I can find them. I can't find them, I don't think. But because of the COVID crisis, mortality in children under 5 from diarrhea will increase approximately by 16,000 a month.
Oh.
So 16,000 children, an additional 16,000 children will die every month from diarrhea because of COVID. Now, those are pretty big figures, even in COVID terms. So that's the challenge we face. Now, there are many social entrepreneurs who are working directly on the COVID issue, working on the direct effects of COVID. We are still working on diarrhea treatment, and our argument is that when we've learned to live with COVID, the demand for cost-effective treatments for all diseases will be bigger than ever. And
Yes.
our work has shown, and other people's work as well, actually, that the most cost-effective treatment for
Mm-hmm.
diarrhea treatment is
Mm-hmm.
co-packaged. In other words, two medicines in the same pack, co-packaged oral rehydration salts and zinc.
Mm.
Now we've managed to get that recommendation on the WHO essential medicines list.
Okay.
We continue to advocate for that
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be even more important
Mm.
as we learn to live with COVID that is available.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how are you exactly looking at partnerships?
Partnerships. Well, I've already said that we could do nothing without partnerships. We needed people to come together just to provide the expertise that was going to be needed to uh, to achieve our vision.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really quite important how these partnerships are put together.
Yes.
And because we are not a social business. We are not ourselves in the business of manufacturing co-packaged
Mm-hmm.
ORS and zinc.
Yes.
We are in the business of changing the system so
Mm-hmm.
that co-packaged ORS and zinc is more freely available everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's other people who do the manufacturing, do the distribution, and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to lose my thread here in a minute if I'm not careful. So yeah, so partnerships. So we had to bring all these people together, and so you know, to get back to my original point, we wanted to create a system which is self-sustaining because we are not going to be there forever. We're not the manufacturer, we're not the distributor, we're the people with the idea and the people who bring together this partnership to make it happen. So it's really
Yes.
important that we are not at the
Mm-hmm.
center of that partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're at the center of that partnership, when we go, which we
Mm-hmm.
will,
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing will collapse. So
Yes.
the approach is to bring the partnership together, not around another partner, but around the
Mm-hmm.
vision. So
Mm.
that
Interesting.
people come to the partnership, it's getting back to that soft power thing, people are attracted to the partnership, not because they like you or because you've got a load of money, but because they sign up to the vision. And that's really important. And in our case, we needed not just the people who would implement the
Mm-hmm.
program once it had been tested and so on. We also needed people like the policymakers, the government, in other words. We needed the regulator
Right.
because policy was going to have to change a bit and the regulation was going to have to change a bit. So they also had to be signed up to this vision and therefore part of this partnership. So
Mm-hmm.
now we've left Zambia. We left. We were there full time to 2016. We left totally in 2018. But the whole
Mm-hmm.
system and the partnership continues without us because it was not built around us. It was built around this shared vision of
Vision.
improving access to diarrhea treatment.
Brilliant.
So it's not just the partnership that's important and who's in that partnership, but how it's formed. It must be
Yes.
formed around a vision, not around one of the partners.
Yes, so important, especially given the focus of the course this week, which is co-creation. So such an important point. I'm going to take another question from one of our live audience, Manish Rai from India, and he asks again another question related to co-creation. Where and what hurdles are you seeing in companies and social entrepreneurs who need to watch out post-COVID era? Should I repeat it once?
Yes,
Got it.
just again.
I'll repeat it once more. Okay.
Yeah.
What, where and what hurdles do you see companies and social entrepreneurs need to watch out in the post-COVID era? So like post the pandemic.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure. I'm struggling to see how it's going to be different in the post-COVID era. I suppose the post-COVID era, it's not going to be post-COVID era, I don't think. It's going to be an era
Mm-hmm.
where we've learned to live with COVID. I mean, I think that's really the more realistic thing. And I don't think the barriers are going to change very much. I mean, I think there are always going to be barriers to what you try to do, and you'll know when you hit a barrier because it's going to be between you and your vision.
Yes.
And you either have to knock it down, rebuild it in some way to make a hole so you can go through it, or go around it. But I suppose the advice I would give is that you should always try and work with the system. So often the system that you're trying to change is the one that's popping up these barriers. And you need to, so working around them, so setting up parallel systems is often very easy to do if you've got lots of money. That's what a lot of aid projects do, for example. They just set up another system and it's great while the aid money's flowing, but as soon as it stops, it collapses and you're back to the old system, which is now worse than the one you know. So you do have to try and work with the system. And that's a lot easier if you've got a partnership in place which is all trying to do the same thing. In other words, they've all shared this vision and they're trying to do the same thing. So barriers shouldn't be too difficult. And if you hit a barrier and there is an organization behind that barrier, bring them into the partnership. Maybe the questioner perhaps can come back with a particular barrier that they have in mind, and we'll address that a bit later, and we'll see how my theory actually might work in practice.
Yes, sure. Okay, I have another question which actually comes from several participants. They all had the same kind of question, so we've actually put it up like one question, and they all want to know that most of them are in their journey to build shared values between nonprofits and companies. Probably they are all entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in making. So they say that all journeys have do's and don'ts, and they understand the do's very well from the conversation. They want to know more about the don'ts. Can you tell us a little bit about what are the absolute don'ts in sharing values or shared values in an initiative between companies and nonprofits?
Right. Okay. The first don't is do not go to other people, potential partners, with a totally formed idea, which is polished to perfection, that you think is wonderful, that you've spent years developing in your mind, spent hours in your bedroom polishing, because the chances are that the other person or the other organization is not going to think it's as good as an idea as you do. And even if they do, it's not their idea. So they're probably going to be resistant to it. So even if you think you've got a really polished idea, rewind a bit to the time when you wasn't quite so polished and present that. And give people the opportunities to contribute to the idea. Once you've got them engaged, you can nudge and chutch and you'll probably end up to a very similar idea to your polished one. So don't go to the market with a really polished idea. That was my first don't. The other thing is don't care about who takes credit. Okay. So, don't go in with your idea, with you wanting to take all the credit. Be generous. I mean, Harry Truman once said, I've got the quote here. Harry Truman said, and I think it's absolutely, I'm just scrolling through to find it. Here it is. And this is absolutely true. He said, it is amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. Okay. In our case, in Zambia, we were a foreign body We were a catalyst. We were going to be there in a temporary, we were going to be there temporarily. So nobody, the customers of the product didn't know we existed. The retailers who sold the product didn't know we existed. The community health workers who promoted the product didn't know we existed. We were invisible. So our branding was nowhere to be seen, because it's not about us. It was about that vision. And we were going to be, we were just temporary actors in the process. Now, if someone wants to do some research, there are some more don'ts. I'm sure I can't just recall them right now, but I've written something on our blog, which is colalife.org/blog, and it's called something like the 7 principles of self-sustaining development. So look for self-sustaining on our website, and you'll see those 7 things. And there are some do's in there, but there are probably 1 or 2 other don'ts, but those are 2 of them.
Great. So everybody who is watching us live, don't forget to visit colalife.org, and especially the blog, which is /colalife.org/blog. And you should be able to find some of these things that Simon has been sharing with us there. Simon, I'm going to take another question from BI UK. Jackie McDonough, she asks, what other traits do you see as vital for co-creation and healthy collaboration? What kind of soft skills are important?
I'm not sure I have, I mean, I think this, well, okay, let me just summarize what I said already. So this idea of you need power to put together partnerships, but it's not the aggressive hard power. It is this pulling of people to your idea. So again, it's sharing your idea carefully, being generous in your being thankful to others, and generous to your partners in terms of giving credit where credit's due, and so on. Listening. Jane is in the background here prompting me. Listening. Listen to what people are saying. Don't go in, telling people what to do. The other thing that we consult, particularly if you're putting a partnership together which has got a target audience in mind. It may be that it's relevant to have the target audience, or at least representatives from that target audience, as part of the partnership. But if that may not be relevant. But even if it's not relevant, make sure that you've spoken to the people or the sector that you're trying to help. So many projects and well-meaning initiatives are based on what people like you and me think other people need. And that may not be right. You've actually got to know, not think, you've got to know what people want. And before you can start to deliver what they want. And want and need, want is an active thing. Progress on the basis of what you know people want, not on what you think they need. I don't think I've answered that question very well, but it's about being humble and generous and listening. And bringing people to you, and the more people that are around your idea, the more power you have to pull in the people you need. Like we needed to pull in Coca-Cola. They weren't going to come in with Jane and Simon, but that once we had 1,000 people on Facebook saying this is a good idea or something that needs to be looked into, they start to take notice.
Right.
The other thing, this is all about, it goes back to what not to do as well, is make sure that you are engaging the system you want to change. It's, don't go around it. It's easy to go around a system that you don't feel is adequate, but it won't last. You have to engage with the people
Important.
who are running the existing system. So it's even though it's difficult and messy, and certainly in terms of health and education, you have to engage the government. If you want to go to
Yes.
scale in health and education, I think it's a universal thing. If you want to go to scale in health and education, you must engage the government, even though that must be, it's very difficult. It may take many years. You have to do it if you want to go to scale. You can set up a little nursery over here or a little health project over there, but actually, if it's not part of the system, it won't have a big impact and it won't last beyond your involvement.
Great. So everybody who's watching us, Simon has been talking about Jane. Jane Berry is Simon's partner in Cola Life and is also Simon's wife. So, so she's sitting behind, and here is Jane. Hi, Jane.
Hi.
Great. So
Now
Simon, you've given
you can't ask the question now, can you? Now that she's here.
Okay, great. But you've given us actually some very, very important but also difficult tips, I will say. I mean, you're talking about power, you're talking about listening, you're talking about driving with power, but then not taking credit. So I'm sure that this will need a lot of practice. Did it need a lot of practice for you, Simon?
I think it's something. I don't think it needs practice, but probably it needed me to get older. You know, I don't think. I mean, when I was younger, I did it. I did much. You know, I was much more. You know, held on to things a lot more. In terms of Jane and I, let me say my bit first, and you can add your bit. But you have to. The other thing you have to be is bold. I mean, you do have to stick your neck out. You have to say, we're going to work with Coca-Cola, for example. I mean, I'm sorry, public health, but that's what we're going to do because they know things that we need to know. And it's very easy to be bold and take risks if you've got someone behind you who's covering your back. And I think that's to some extent how we've worked. But Jane, go on. What do you think?
I mean, as a partnership, hello everybody, by the way. As a partnership, and we have worked together in a charity prior to Cola Life, so we did know how to work with each other and what we were getting ourselves into. But if you are working closely with a partner or in a team, then I think it's important to have somebody who is concentrating on the vision and the boldly go part, which is often Simon, most usually Simon, but also somebody who is in the background, making sure that all the details are there, that the log frame is there, that the risk stuff is there, that the records are there, that the processes and procedures. I mean, you have to have that, the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's. Now, it's very rare to have all of those skills in one person. So I think I would say, as an entrepreneur or as a co-creator, be very aware of your own skills and where your strengths are and what you really enjoy doing, what, you know, gets you going in the morning when you wake up, and be aware of where you need somebody else or other people on your team, not necessarily two, it might be 3 or 4, to actually complement what you like doing, what you love doing, what you can be successful at. And so that those things on your to-do list that you don't want to do actually get done. I mean, and I like the visionary stuff as well, but it, you know, and I like standing up in front of people and talking, but it just so happens that in our partnership, somebody needs to do the tough stuff behind the scenes, and often, but not always, that falls to me. If it's technical and it's to do with IT and it's the boring stuff, then Simon does it, because I don't do technical.
The other thing that's quite interesting is that there are several social entrepreneur partnerships that are husband and wife. And I think that isn't a coincidence, because this thing can become all-consuming. And if you aren't doing it with your partner in life, then it can be pretty difficult. There are some horror stories of Ashoka Fellows who have done extraordinary things, but it's been at the expense of their family.
Yes.
Because they've just gone off and done something, and it, at the expense of other things in their lives. But so actually there is a massive benefit if you both share the same passion.
Yes.
And both heading in the same direction. I mean, it's building the partnership. You say around a shared vision. It's the same thing, isn't it? On a smaller scale.
Yes, yes. And Jane, thank you so much for that spiel. It was so important and it was so contextual. Our participants are amazed to hear that from you. And I must tell you that often we've heard from social entrepreneurs that the first barrier that they need to cross is their families, because they don't believe in their visions. So I think this is a coincidence, but a beautiful one, that you've been turning a coincidence into a success. So definitely a lot of people will give probably thought to kind of, having this kind of partnerships. Okay, so we are just 8 minutes away from the end of this session. So I have lots of other questions, and there are at least another, I think, a couple of questions, very important, that I need to ask you, but I will have to jump to the concluding questions. And one of the concluding questions that I have for you, and because now we have Jane also, is what are some of the greatest lessons you have learned in creating partnerships? And along with that, what keeps you motivated to do what you're doing? How you do it every time?
You want to start with that? Or?
To start with, what was your exact point again about the partnerships?
Some greatest lessons, like, what has been like your lessons? Yes.
Yeah. Well, my role, let me speak from my role in our particular partnership, which from the beginning has been, if you like, formally orchestrating the bringing together of a partnership, which I think Simon has mentioned and spoken of, how you would do that, how you get people around the vision and so on. And I think you can't expect that just to happen. And you can't expect to stand up in front of people and give a presentation and for that then to happen naturally. You have to have people involved in, workshops sometimes have a bad name, but there has to be a participatory process that you take people through to bring them on board. And that's been my role really from the beginning of our work together on Cola Life, is once you get people into a room together, what practical steps are you actually going to get them to do on that day or in that 2-hour slot or whatever, so that they are able to make their contribution to this vision, to this plan that you have to work together, and come away feeling that they have been listened to. And there are lots of processes that we've used, participatory processes sometimes that have a background in community development, that have a background sometimes in international development, which you can harness in order to do that planning and make that participation real for those partners. So I think that's my lesson, really, to use those tools.
I'm going to refer people to our playbook, which is going to be launched on the 28th of October. So it's a week today. However, you can go and look at it now. And there's a section there on tools and techniques, which Jane has just talked about. And there's also a section on key learning points. So the URL is very easy. It's bit.ly, so it's bit.ly/Cola Life Playbook, all one word. It's an interactive document. It's a Google Doc, actually. So you can suggest edits. You can ask further questions in there, and we will answer them. So our playbook is the mechanism that we are using to support other people like us in other countries to improve access to diarrhea treatment. In terms of how we keep motivated, we've been at this now for 10 years, and to be honest with you, more than years. Yeah, well, if you consider
12 years.
Right.
Really.
So to be honest, our energy levels are dropping. But that's okay, because the nature of the work has changed. When I look back at what we've done, it completely exhausts me, and there's no way I could do it again. And if I knew what I was letting myself in for at the time, maybe it would never have started. But anyway, it's been a fantastic journey. Now we've got to the point where we've scaled up in Zambia. That's all running by itself, and we need to globalize our impact. So we've created this playbook, and we'll be supporting users of the playbook through the playbook itself. At the same time, we are working with UNICEF and WHO to accelerate the cascading of the new global recommendation, which we helped create, down to national governments. And when that is in place, when that new policy is in place at national level, our playbook will be even more useful, because it will show people how we did what we did in Zambia, and that may be helpful to them to do the same thing in their own country.
So I'd add to that, know when to let go. I mean, I talked earlier just now about getting people engaged and how to get them on board and how to get the partnership going. But then you, as the entrepreneur or social entrepreneur or co-creator, you need to know when your job's finished. You need to know where to let go and when to mainstream or allow what you have done to go mainstream. Because if you try to keep hold of it, it's like raising children. Yes. You have to let them go. You have to let your ideas go, and you have to let your teenagers go and find their own way. And it's the same with ideas.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Simon and Jane, for all the wisdom, for all the experience that you shared with us. And I'm sure that our learners are going to make the best out of this knowledge. And of course, we are going to also give the link to the playbook so that our learners who are watching us and those who will be watching the video later will be able to access that. There is a great, I think, resource that everybody can refer to. But I'll still ask you one last concluding question. What is the motivation that keeps you going apart from each other?
Well, the key, there is nothing more important than keeping children alive. Whatever I've done else in my life has not been as important as this. I mean, it's just an absolute tragedy that while we've been talking, which has been out 60 minutes, 60 children would have died from diarrhea. And those could have been future leaders. They would have certainly contributed to, happiness, well-being, livelihoods. And while we have that level of mortality, economic or progress in other areas is going to be limited. So that's what keeps me going. There's nothing more important than saving children's lives.
I think I have to agree with that. And I think what keeps you going, if you can find one thing in your life, even a small thing, a single thing that you can do, that you can be successful at, and maybe you'll have failures and several things will fail. But if you find that an idea does make its way through and does get momentum behind it and will make a change, then hold on to that motivation. Learn from your failures, and if you hit that brick wall, don't keep banging your head against it. Move to the next thing. But then when you find that wave, be ready to ride it. It won't be an easy ride, but it's very exhilarating when it goes right.
Right. Thank you so very much, Simon. Thank you so very much, Jane, for taking the time to be with us and for sharing everything that you shared. And we are closing the session as of now, but just before we sign off, a reminder, if you have not taken the survey yet, please see it below the screen and please take the survey to get your extra points. Also, next week, we will meet you twice. You will meet my colleague Sharon for the office hours on 29th of October, and I shall see you on 28th October once again with the guest expert, Mark Sheng, for the second last webinar of the season. And until then, have a great time with your learning journey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.